Thanks for tuning in to the HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda. The HR Uprising is focused on helping forward-thinking people professionals deliver real lasting value in their organisations. I'm a chartered psychologist, speaker and trainer, and recently authored the best-selling business book, How to Be a Change Superhero. My day job is founder and CEO of software and training business Actus. This gives me the opportunity to work with other businesses like yours. We are focused on building a better workplace for people wherever they are located, with the help of our performance, learning and talent management software and our training and consultancy services. Every week on the podcast, I will be covering different topics and challenges, joined by relevant experts and real-life people professionals. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy and get value from this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. And I've got Jessi Beyer with me today, and we are talking about a topic, having done the HR Uprising podcast for 6 years now, that we haven't ever covered before, yet it's such an important topic. So Jessi, when you reached out to me, I thought, gosh, I can't believe we haven't done this. And it's really a vital topic, isn't it? It's something vital, but we don't necessarily think about how we can try and do something about it. So we're actually going to talk about suicide prevention. And Jessi, I think I'm actually just going to hand to you to tell me about how you became an expert in this area. Because off camera, I was saying, is this your day job? Is it your side hustle? And it's kind of a bit of both in terms of you don't sleep a lot, but what you're doing is really vital and important. So please do introduce yourself to our audience.
Absolutely. Well, Lucinda, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm so glad that this topic resonated with you enough to have a conversation about it, because it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. And my story and how I kind of got in this space is when I was in high school, when I was 16, my boyfriend at the time attempted suicide. And I mean, I was a kid. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was the one that ended up calling emergency services to come take him to the hospital and make sure that he couldn't follow through with that attempt. And that night for me really changed things. It opened my eyes to the fact that our crisis system is really struggling. It's broken. We need more education. We need more support, because it's those people that are kind of those frontline supports. It's friends, it's family members, it's colleagues that are going to be the people that recognize suicidal ideation first. I mean, in his case, I was his complete and total confidant. He didn't go to his parents. He didn't go to a therapist. All of that was on my shoulders. And yes, we could have a conversation about boundaries and reaching out for help and all of that, but I had no education on how to support him and how to be there for him while keeping myself safe. And so that really kicked off all of my interest in suicide prevention, in crisis work. Went to school, got a couple degrees, and now what I do is I work simultaneously as a suicide prevention trainer, working with high impact organizations, helping them create this culture of care within their organization, and essentially all become support systems for each other. And then I also do a lot of field work. I'm embedded with law enforcement over here in the United States, and I do respond to emergency calls that have some sort of mental health component attached to them. So let's say mom calls in and says, oh my gosh, my husband said that he was going to take his own life. I don't know where he is. Please help me find him, something like that. Or someone who's experiencing psychosis or substance use challenges. And then at the really high end of that spectrum, I also work as a negotiator on our SWAT team. So as Lucinda said, not a lot of sleeping, but I'm very enmeshed in this work of crisis intervention and suicide prevention, and I'm very passionate about it.
Gosh, and I'll try not to get distracted by the SWAT thing, which sounds incredibly impressive, because we don't have SWAT over here. I'm sure we have something that's equivalent, but that's busy. As high, everything's about high impact, right? You've got to get it right in the moment, but also in terms of people. So, and almost from one scale to the next. So in terms of, I suppose, focusing in on this sort of prevention, suicide prevention, and I hope your boyfriend of the time did make it through. Did he go on to fully recover?
He did, yeah. I mean, he and I haven't spoken since I was in high school, which has been a number of years at this point, but he survived. He went to college. He was working in economics, which, I mean, good for him, I guess, but he was, moving on with his life, last I heard.
So thinking about where you've taken this professionally, and obviously our audience is HR people. We're not talking that not expecting HR need to be therapists. They've got enough things on their shoulders already. But maybe it's about how can we
spot challenges in others, or get teams to spot challenges or distress in others. There is something key there about boundaries, which is also really important. But it maybe, what do you think? You've developed a model, haven't you? Your life model, the LIFE model.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain a bit about that? Because I think that's one of the things we could use to take this episode through and explain that.
Absolutely. And just to touch on your point of we're not trying to turn HR professionals into therapists, absolutely not. HR professionals are already kind of burdened and saddled with all of the random miscellaneous people things at an organization. So we don't want to put any more on their shoulders. But what I do find very frustrating about my own profession in the mental health space is that all of these tools and tactics are kind of gate kept behind the degree and the license, when in reality, so many of these tools are things that everyday professionals, including HR, including IT, including customer support, can use for their own friends and family members and colleagues. And so that's really my goal here, is to translate everything that I learned through my graduate degrees, through my field experience, and package it up very nicely in this life model so that you as an HR professional can implement this with people that come to you for support. You can teach your teams it. You can make sure that everyone in your organization understands it. So the life model is 4 steps. I spent entirely too long coming up with an acronym that was somewhat related to suicide prevention.
Great acronym.
I know. Thank you. I appreciate it. And so the life model is really everything that you need to know as a non-mental health professional to take someone from, hey, I'm thinking about suicide, or hey, I'm having a really bad day, all the way through to let's make sure you're safe and let's connect you to resources. Yeah. So LIFE, the L in that is listen. And some people, when they hear active listening, they're either like, oh my God, not again, or they get really excited about it. But the way that I teach active listening, and Lucinda, we can go through each of those steps, is really tactical. It's not just, show them you care or let them know that you're there for them. It's like, okay, what do you say? How do you frame this sentence to make it the most impactful it possibly can be? So L is listen. The whole purpose of that is really to build enough of a relationship with this person in the moment of crisis where they feel comfortable doing the next 3 steps with you. The I is inquire. So how do you ask about suicidal ideation? How do you figure out if this person is just having a bad day and needs someone to talk to, or is legitimately in danger of potentially taking their life within the next 24 hours? So in that I section, we can break down, how do you ask? What words do you use? How do you do like a quick and dirty risk assessment to understand where on that spectrum of acuity someone might be? The F is forming a safety plan. So previously, if you go back like 20, 25 years in suicide prevention, we had safety contracts. And that's essentially where, Lucinda, you and I would sit down and I would sign a piece of paper saying, I'm not going to take my own life because I'm signing this piece of paper. And if you think about it, that doesn't really do a whole lot, because then now I'm just living for you. And that's not a really effective way to get through the day. So we now have safety.
So what if I don't sign it and decide to sign it and take it and I've been successful? So what?
Absolutely.
I get the benefit of contracting, but yes, it's perhaps not that perspective.
Absolutely. And so what we've done now is we've transitioned to safety plans. Very similar name, very different in practice. And what a safety plan is it's essentially a collection of resources that this person can use when they start to notice a bit of suicidal ideation cropping up. So it's things like suicide prevention hotlines. It's things like friends and family they can call, distraction activities. And we can, again, break all these down further, but just to give the high level overview now. It's a pre-set of resources that people can use, because when you get into a crisis brain and you get into a very high emotional arousal state, your ability to sit down and think, what are my good coping mechanisms, kind of goes out the window. And so you want them prepared in advance. And then the E of the life model is eliminating lethal means, which is essentially the thing or the method that the person would use to take their life. Your goal with this is not to remove every sort of dangerous thing from the person's life, but it's to recognize a few key dangers and see how you can put time and distance between the person and the method that they would want to use. So to sum it all up, L is listen, I is inquire, F is forming a safety plan, and E is eliminating lethal means. And if you can do those 4 things, you will be able to handle and de-escalate the vast majority of suicidal or mental health crises that you might encounter in your workplace.
So, and that sounds really helpful. And I think we can drill into it a little bit. What I'd quite like to do before we go there is maybe look at 2 different ends of the spectrum that went through my mind about how you might come up with it. But one, the most extreme, least likely for us to come across, although it does happen, it might be more likely for you in your professional role, is I know someone, I saw this the other day on social media locally, that someone was standing on a bridge threatening to throw themselves off, and there was someone, it could be anyone, trying to stop them from doing it. So you've got that extreme to the sort of quiet person that's maybe withdrawn, and they go off and you hear from people go, I had no idea, there were no signs or anything like that. How could you maybe spot the signs? So it's almost like what your top tips might be if you find yourself in an unexpected crisis situation as a non-professional, and equally, what are the hidden signs that you might not spot of somebody who's sort of hiding it? Do you want to take those two examples?
Absolutely. Yeah. So on this really high end of the spectrum, I'll even take it one step further with some types of calls that we get even beyond the person on a building, because reasonably, potentially, if you work in an organization and you work in a very tall building, you could have someone on the roof. So taking it even one step further for my end of things, where people like myself would absolutely get involved, we sometimes have people call emergency services and say, hey, I'm going to take my life. I just want to let you know where to find the body. I'm sitting with a loaded gun in my lap right now. And as soon as I hang up with you, I'm pulling the trigger. That's like the really, really, really high end of the spectrum. And in situations like that, really ranging anywhere from person on a building to something like I just described, you're going to need to do so much more so much more listening before you can get to those other steps. So as a negotiator, one of the first things that we're taught is to slow everything down. Take your time, ask questions, talk about their dog, talk about what type of tacos they like at Taco Bell, like just have a conversation with them, human to human. One of the biggest risk factors for suicide is feeling like you don't have people around you. And so if you, as this person helping someone in crisis, can let that person know, hey, I'm here. You want to talk about the dog? Let's talk about the dog. You want to talk about work? Let's talk about that. Slow it down, have those conversations. At the same time, please call for additional help. Please call emergency services. Please call people who are trained at a very high level for this type of thing. Don't feel like you have to handle it yourself. But in that interim between when you call emergency services and when they arrive, just talk. Just talk and listen. Don't try to fix it. Don't beg them, oh my gosh, please come down. Please come down. Hey man, what's going on? What brought you up here today? And just have a conversation with them. On the other end of the spectrum, we're talking about that employer or that colleague that's maybe a little withdrawn, and then they take their life and you're like, oh my gosh, I had absolutely no idea. That is a very frequent response to someone who died by suicide. And in most cases, I push back on that a little bit. It's not you didn't notice any signs, it's did you try to notice any signs? Did you even notice what signs to notice, right? Did you even know what to look for? And I'm not placing blame on anyone, right? If someone dies by suicide, that was their decision. And if they were committed to it, there was not a whole lot you can do to stop it. But I do want to challenge people to, instead of just saying, oh my gosh, I didn't know the signs, learn the signs. Let's talk about them. And so some of the things that you can recognize in someone that is maybe a little withdrawn, that you don't know super well, but that you could see. The biggest one is going to be any dramatic changes in behavior. So if you had someone that usually spoke first at team meetings, they were always 5 minutes early, always stayed 5 minutes late. They always brought donuts on Valentine's Day for the team, whatever that is. And then you notice that, hey, Jessi was late like 5 days in a row. And wow, she's really quiet in those meetings. I wonder if everything's okay. That type of change in behavior, a change in behavior in appearance as well. If someone is normally super well groomed, very professional clothing, hair's on point, makeup's on point, and then that starts to slip a little bit, that could be a sign to connect with someone. Or any substance use changes as well. If they were not a drinker and now they're showing up and looking a little tipsy, if they're smoking more, if they're trying recreational drugs, those are things to pay attention to as well. I want to highlight here that it's not as much, oh, is this person thinking about taking their life? It could just be they're going through a divorce. They just got demoted.
It's signs, and it could be signs of depression. I mean, because presumably depression would generally be something that would precede suicide, right? So it's signs of people are starting to get into a dark place, and you can maybe prevent them going further.
Yeah, you can interrupt that cycle before it gets to the point of a suicide attempt. And the last thing I'll say, before I let more questions come in, because I could just talk forever about this. But the last thing I'll say that's important to recognize, especially in a corporate or workplace setting, is what's called leakage. Leakage is when someone gives a little bit of suicidal ideation to see how the room responds. So for example, if you and your team are, happy hour after work, you're going out for some drinks and you're all talking about, oh my gosh, marriage is really hard. Like I'm having this challenge, I'm having this challenge. And the person that, some person in the group responds and is like, yeah, I just think my wife would be happier if I went and jumped off a cliff. And everyone's like, oh, haha, yeah, marriage is
Yes.
hard. That's really funny. But if
Yeah.
no one follows up with that person afterwards and pulls them aside and is like, hey, Jess, I heard you say that. Is everything okay? I just want to check in. If no one does that, I have now decided, as the person in crisis who let that little bit of suicidal ideation out, that none of you can be trusted. None of you cared enough to follow up and ask. And whether that's true or not, that's my perception. That's my understanding. And now I'm even more isolated. Now I have
Yes.
even fewer supports. So I work with law enforcement. I have a ton of deputies and cops that post on Instagram all these like really dark suicidal humor type memes. And whether that's good or not is a different discussion. But my point of bringing it up is I always follow up with them with a quick little Instagram DM of like, LOL, dude, so funny. Also just checking in. Are you okay? And 99.9% of the time they get back to me and they're like, Jessi, stop shrinking me. I'm fine. And I'm like, cool, all good. We're good. But I would rather bother 99 people than not ask about the one who needs it.
Yeah.
So if you hear that little joke about suicidal ideation in the workplace, you can laugh in a group, no big deal, do whatever you got to do. But, 5 minutes later when they're at the water cooler, hey, just checking in, just wanted to make sure things are good. That in and of itself could be enough to disrupt that cycle of someone spiraling into depression and potentially a suicide attempt.
And the interesting thing is, even if they sort of saying out, I'm fine, they might not, they might have been a tiny, some of, let's say 2 out of that 99 might not have been that fine, but you kind of, by saying it, they kind of go, no, actually, it's, you've still shown you cared.
Yes,
You've still given them that little bit of connection. So you don't
absolutely.
always know, actually, really. I mean, that's just but so the moral of the story is really make sure you are the person who just checks in, whatever, just take that moment just to show you bother check in with somebody, and encourage, in as an HR professional, encourage managers or individuals check on each other. Just do that in a very busy world, particularly in hybrid environments as well, where we're not necessarily seeing people face to face, so much as well. It's just, it can be a message, like you said. It doesn't have to be a face to face.
Yeah.
Just be the one to ask, 'cause that makes them feel that someone is bothered.
Absolutely. Be the one to ask. We all get in this situation where we're like, oh no, I don't want to bother them. Susie will ask. And then Susie's like, I don't know, Bob will ask. And then no one ends up asking. Be the person that asks. They might not take you up on it. Like you said, they might be, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. But you just planted the seed in the back of their head of like, hey, someone noticed, someone
Yeah.
cares. And when that person is ready to reach out for help, you're going to be top of their list because you've already proven that you care enough to actually ask and see how they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in an organization, would you say that there's more you should do in an organization than, I mean, like we've got to say, be the person? That's something very individual. If you're trying to maybe look at the culture of an organization, some cultures might not be so supportive of that. Do you have broader recommendations for organizations to help with this sort of thing?
Absolutely. So, two kind of ways to approach this. One is if you have a culture that is supportive of mental health, like what are some things that you can do? And then what if you don't? So, if you do have a culture that's supportive of mental health and you're backed by your C-suite executives of let's make this culture one that's really good for mental health, making sure that there's available resources. So that could be everything from employee assistance programs to having flyers of hotlines, kind of placed around, to making sure that your health insurance provides access to mental health care. I will say transparently for myself, for a period of my life, my health insurance didn't provide mental health care coverage. Well, it did, but it only covered 3 providers in the nation. And what's really important about working with a mental health care provider is that you have a good relationship with them. Like that fit is just as important as their
Yeah.
clinical skill. And so for me, I was kind of like, well, I don't really mesh with any of these people. And so I didn't have access to those resources. So making sure that if you work in benefits, if you work in HR, making sure that your people have
Yeah.
access to adequate mental health resources. But even beyond that, make sure that your organization, people to people, has that community of care. Because you, again, as an HR professional, you're not a therapist. You're not going to be able to check in on every single person that's out there. And so make sure that the people who are know these skills, know the life model, know how to talk to people, know how to ask about suicide. And so think in your organization, who has the most contact with people? Who are these trusted supports? Is it your mid-level management? Is it every individual team leader? Is it random Susie in the corner who no one really knows what she does, but she's always there for people when someone needs her? Like, who are these people? Make sure they're trained, make sure they're supported. And if you want to go really far, build an internal peer support organization. That's something that's very common in healthcare teams, first responder teams, not as much in corporate teams, but having a dedicated group of peers that employees can come to and say, hey, I'm struggling. It's confidential. It's not going to get reported up. That can be a really, really powerful way to affect change in a culture that already knows mental health is important. If you're in a culture that doesn't, and you are the token HR professional that is screaming from the rooftops about how we need to be talking about mental health in the workplace, maybe you're in an industry like construction or vet med that has way higher suicide rates than other industries. This sounds bad, but just run with me for a second. One of the most important things you can do is talk to your leadership about the financial risk of suicidal ideation in the workplace. So every employee that dies by suicide costs every associated employee approximately 10,000 US dollars in benefits, in time off, in therapy. Because what happens is suicide can often become a little bit of a bubble. So you know someone who died by suicide, you are now more likely to die by suicide. And in a tight-knit workplace, that can expand very rapidly. So not only are you experiencing the terrible loss of life and the just devastation that that brings to the workplace and to that person's family, but there is also a financial implication for that. And if you're talking to an employer, like I do sometimes, where I reach out to folks and they're like, oh, our mental health is perfect, we don't have any challenges. I'm like, really? It's absolutely perfect. I don't know how I feel about that. Another stat that you can share with your higher
I'd say
ups
that's a bit
is
of a
that
warning sign, like, to be honest.
it is. It absolutely is. I legitimately, when that person said that to me, for their employees, because I'm like, I can almost guarantee you that is not the case. And statistically, something that your employer is that approximately 4% of people every year consider suicide. So if you are in an organization of 100 people, 4 of them every year are thinking about suicide. That doesn't mean that 4 are going to attempt or that 4 are going to die by suicide, but it means that the thought is there. And so if you can combine some of those statistics of like, it's here and it's costing us something, sometimes that's enough to change the tides in an organization that doesn't think they need to care about mental health.
And you were talking about how, I can't remember your term for it. We have a term over in the UK called mental health first aiders. Is that a term you use in the US as well? Because they might be the
We have
people that
similar
might.
programs, yeah.
Yeah.
I think mental health first aid is just UK, but in the US we have other types of like non-mental health professional educational programs like that.
But that was an example of investing in something like that. And again, we've got a different health service, etc. But making sure your benefits are going to support counselling and a choice of counsellors and more than NHS
Yes.
counsellors and that sort of things. All of these just thinking about, because when the worst happens, you want to make sure that you can give people the maximum support. But it's easy to not think about it until it's too late.
Yes,
In terms of
absolutely. And it's
provisions, isn't it?
often common to think about medical concerns. We have great health insurance. We have, in the US, we have paid medical leave, like long term, if you have to go for a long injury or a long illness, like cancer or something like that. We have all these setups, but not all of them cover mental health concerns. So, thinking about you as an HR professional, what happens when your employees have to go to inpatient treatment for 3 months? Are they going to have a job when they get back? Or is that covered by medical leave benefits? I don't know. That's something that you have to figure out and make sure is accessible to your employees, because that is just as likely to happen, if not more likely to happen, than them getting cancer and being out for 3 months.
The interesting thing is as well that really small organisations, like when we work in, a small organisation is possibly less likely to think about the cover, but more likely to have a massive impact, because one person stepping out of a small organisation for a significant amount of time, they may be the only person that can do something, or the stress. So it's almost, if you're an HR department of one in a smaller business, it's almost more important to persuade the board or the people with the purse strings that actually let's really invest here to make sure that we have got that protection, because the impact is really high.
It's really high. And not only that, but you're more likely to notice it. If you are employee number 723 out of 10,000, like maybe your team will recognize if you're struggling, maybe someone will see you. But in a large way, you're kind of a cog in a wheel. Whereas in a team of 10, a team of 20, everyone probably knows each other. Everyone probably knows each other's kids' names and dogs' names
Yeah.
and where they live. And there's probably some summer barbecues going on. And so those people are even more likely to recognize. And those people that are struggling are more likely to go to one of you as a colleague and ask for support than number
Yes.
723 out of 10,000. So
And
yeah, it's
feel the
even more
impact.
important
Yeah.
for small
Like
teams.
losing a member of the family. Absolutely. Yes.
Mhm.
So, so we agreed it's, you know, it's serious. We can be the person to go out and reach out to, you know, and encourage others to do that, to look more broadly at the provision that we can have there, not just for the person who might need help, but also for others around them in terms of supporting people.
Mhm.
You said at the start you're going to maybe go back to the life model, and you might want to break it down a little bit more. And also you've got some tactical communication strategies, haven't you? Six
Yes.
communication strategies. So why don't we go on to that stage?
Absolutely. So this is like my nerd topic. I could nerd out about communication skills all day long, because they are so important. And just to give an example of how important for maybe some of your listeners listen to that are like, I know how to talk to people. Like, I don't need these types of skills. I got a call one time, and then again, this is a high level crisis. I don't expect anyone in HR to try to handle this by themselves. But in my job, I got a call one day for someone that needed to be arrested. They had assaulted their wife, and now they were in their house and they weren't coming out. And so my sergeant calls me and he's like, "Hey, Jessi, here's the phone. Call them, talk them out." And I'm like, "Okay." So I pick up the phone and I talk to this person. And for context, he is a trained MMA fighter, who is experiencing psychosis and had just beaten up the person that he claims to love. So that's the context that we're working with here.
Yeah.
So I call him and I say, "Hey, I'm Jessi. I'm with the sheriff's office. What's going on today?" First words out of his mouth: "What the heck do you want? I'm not coming out. If anyone comes up here, I'm going to fight them," with a lot of expletives thrown in there. And I'm like, "Hey, great. Let's talk about it." And so I'm listening to him and he's telling me that, I'm going to be enslaved by the gods and all these types of things that are not grounded in reality. And I'm talking to him using the same 6 skills that I'm going to share with you. And after about half an hour, he's like, "Okay, I'm coming out. What do you want me to do?" And I'm like, "Okay." So that's the power that these types of communication skills have. It's not just fluffy. It's not just, oh, make them feel good. It's like this can literally change the trajectory of someone's life. So that's my backstory as to why I'm like very
Love
passionate
it.
about these skills. So these 6 skills, the first one is called reflection. So reflection is when you take what someone says to you and you say it back to them while pulling at the emotions that are underneath. So for example, if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, I'm going through a divorce. It's a really hard time at home. I really just, I'm having a really hard time right now." A reflection could be, "Hey, it sounds like you're feeling really, betrayed by your spouse and you're going through this really hard divorce right now," whatever the context of the conversation is. So you're reflecting back, they're going through a divorce, you're saying the fact back to them. And then you're also thinking to yourself, okay, what might they be feeling? They're betrayed, they're sad, they're lonely, they're angry, whatever that is, reflect that emotion back to them as well. I really encourage people to set this up as it sounds like, it looks like, or it feels like, as opposed to "I understand."
Yeah.
Oftentimes, when we say, "I understand what you're going through," even if maybe you've been through a divorce, maybe it was a really hard divorce for you too, you haven't been through that person's divorce. And I've
And
seen
you
a
get the
lot of
feeling you might have
providers,
been sad, and they might be really
yeah,
angry. You know,
yeah. And maybe yours was amicable and theirs was, there was infidelity involved or
yeah.
whatever it is. And so I've seen a lot of providers and like healthcare workers and first responders get into this battle with people where they'll be like, "Oh, I understand what you're going through." And they're trying to be empathetic, but the person's like, "No, you don't." And then they're like, "Well, yeah, I do. I went through a divorce too." "Well, you didn't go through that." And they're just back
Yeah.
and forth and back and
But
forth.
they're
And we're
taking it back,
missing the
making it about
point.
them, aren't they? That's the other thing. So
Yeah.
you're keeping the focus on that person. So it sounds like it sounds like you're really frustrated, or it sounds like that's been a really painful experience for you.
Yep.
And also
Absolutely.
almost saying that was this reminds me of empathic listening that Stephen Covey would talk about. And if you sort of say it with a question mark on the end, you're not
Yes.
just it's they can still say yeah or well not quite but this. So they're
Mhm.
still expressing, and you're not taking away their emotion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's great. And if someone does come back to you and is like, well, no, I'm not angry, I'm devastated. You're like, oh, okay, so you're devastated, and then just hammer home on that devastation, right? It's
Yeah.
okay to be corrected. That's totally fine. So yeah, that's my first one, reflection. I use it
Yeah.
all the time. Once you learn it too, it's kind of hard to turn it off. Like I'll be talking to my friends or my mom or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, Jessi, stop being a clinician right now. So they just become part of your communication. And then number two is a minimal encourager. So a minimal encourager is the sound that you make when someone is talking to let them know that you're listening, but they just keep right on talking. So it's your yes, oh, wow, okay. It's those types of things that let them know I'm still here, I'm listening, but I'm not interrupting you. This is not what you do when your mother calls and you put her on speaker and you pull up Instagram and you start scrolling while she's talking. Like this is still very
Is that,
engaged. Yep,
yeah.
right, right. No, you're still very engaged. You can use body language minimal encouragers as well. So nodding, leaning in, if they say something surprising, being like, "Oh my gosh," and kind of pulling back a little bit. Those all are minimal encouragers. I teach a class very similar to what we're talking about on this podcast at our dispatch academy, our emergency services dispatch academy for all the new hires. And I bring this up to say that they only have their voice. They don't have any sort of body language. And so I tell them you can use more minimal encouragers than you think you need to. If someone is in crisis or even just slightly emotionally escalated, they're not picking up everything that you're saying. So if you feel like you're sitting there going, yeah, yeah, wow, they're probably only picking up every third thing. So you can do a little bit more than you think you can with minimal encouragers. And then moving on to our third one, this is exactly, Lucinda, you were like one step ahead of me with the question mark at the end, because this is our question mark one. So this is called a mirror. And a mirror is exactly what it sounds like. You're mirroring back what they said. It's a little bit different than a reflection, whereas in a mirror, you're taking kind of the last 3 to 5 words that they said and putting a question mark on the end of it. So if someone's saying, oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible parent, my kids deserve better than me, you would say, oh, better than you? And they would say, oh yeah, well, I'm drunk all the time and I miss all their football games and blah, 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 whatever that is. It lets them keep talking and lets you dig a little bit deeper without kind of hammering them with question after question after question after question. For someone who's being emotionally vulnerable, getting direct questions can often feel like an interrogation. And you don't want to create that type of environment where you're just digging for info all the time. At the same time, you want them to keep talking. Remember, slow it down, build rapport, just talk to them. And so asking these types of mirroring questions is a gentle way to let them keep going. I also use a mirror sometimes when I don't know what to say next. And I'm trying to think, like, where do I want to take this conversation? How do we get to a safe resolution here? So I'll use a couple mirrors. They keep talking. I keep thinking. And then we figure out where we want to go from here. Sometimes what'll happen though is you'll mirror someone. So, I'm such a terrible parent. My kids deserve better than me. Oh, better than you? Yeah. Okay, what next? They'll only respond with like a yes or no type of answer.
Yeah.
And so that's when you would need to follow up with an actual like full sentence question, which brings me to my fourth skill, which is open-ended questions. To clarify between open and closed-ended questions, open-ended questions are questions where people can respond with long sentences, stories, paragraphs. They can talk about something, whereas a closed-ended question is a yes or no answer. So, did you have a good weekend is a closed-ended question. You can say yes or no. Or how was your weekend? What did you do this weekend? Now you're telling me about it. You're telling me how you felt. You're telling me what you did. That's an open-ended question. The reason we want to use open-ended versus closed-ended questions is because, again, that interrogation piece, you don't want them to feel like they're under attack, but also it lets them direct the conversation. So if you come into the conversation and you're like, hey, I have these 10 things that I'm going to ask, these are the things that I need to know about, you might miss a really, really crucial part of someone's story because you're only focused on your questions. But if you leave it open-ended, they can take it where they're comfortable, they can take it to what's important to them. And that can really change the tone of a conversation. The last thing I'll say about open-ended questions is that you want to try to avoid why questions. They are technically open-ended, like they do require a longer response, but again, it makes that person feel so defensive and like they have to now justify why they're doing what they're doing or feeling what they're feeling. So if we're talking about that really serious crisis situation, someone's on the roof of the tall building and thinking about jumping, instead of saying, hey, why are you up here? Why do you want to take your life today? No matter how gentle my tone is, that still sounds like, well, what do you mean,
Yeah.
why? And now you have to defend yourself. You can reframe it as a what or a how question. So, what brought you up here today? How did you land at this decision? What's driving this? What brought you here? Those types of questions, you're still going to get your why answer, but it's just in a much gentler and approachable way for that person. So those are the first four, two more left. Number 5 is a summary statement. A summary statement is essentially when you take everything that they've said thus far and you say it back to them to confirm that you're accurate. So that looks something like, hey, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying correctly. I've heard you say that you're going through a really hard divorce, your kid is sick, and you're struggling financially. Is that correct? And the purpose of that, is that correct, at the end, exactly like you were saying earlier from Stephen Covey's work, is they can either say, yep, that's it, you got it, good. Now we have some rapport, we have some empathy, they feel heard and understood. Or they're going to say, no, it's not my kid that's sick, it's my dog. And then you're like, oh, okay, cool. So it's your dog that's sick. And now we're back on the same path. What can sometimes happen is if you are thinking, I know this perfect resource, I'm going to refer this person to this resource, it's going to be great. You get to the end of the conversation, you refer them to that resource, and they're like, okay, but that's not actually the problem that I'm struggling with. You could have avoided that whole awkward situation just by using a summary statement somewhere in there. A summary statement is one of the only times I will interrupt someone if they're just talking and sharing about their life and their struggles, especially if they're throwing a lot of things at me or it's a very complex story and I kind of start to lose track a little bit. I'll use a summary statement. Hey, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure I'm understanding you. And if I frame it like that, usually they're okay with the interruption. Sometimes you will have people come back that are like, oh, well, I was still talking. And you're like, okay, sorry, please continue. And then, you follow up when they're done. But in general, that does work pretty well for summary statements. And then lastly, we have silence as an active listening skill. And silence is so difficult for people, especially people that want to help and want to make other people feel better. It can feel so uncomfortable to just sit in that silence without offering, a platitude really of, hey, it's going to be okay, or offer some sort of solution or ask some sort of question. But the power of silence is that in that moment, when that person is silent, when they're thinking, when they're crying, whatever that is, subconsciously they're debating whether they can trust you with that next deepest, darkest part of their story. And if you jump in with, hey, it's going to be all right, or hey, at least so and so thing isn't happening, or you redirect with a question, what you're telegraphing to that person is that you are not comfortable with all of the depth that they're sharing. You're like, we need to move on, we need to say something, we need to fix this. But if you show them through your silence, I'm here. It's okay. I'm not going anywhere. I can hold all this with you. That lets them know that you are safe to share that next thing with.
Mm.
What I often encourage people to do is 10 seconds of silence. And this is not like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 silence. Like it is a legitimate 10 seconds of silence. Let that person sit with those emotions for a little bit. Let them debate where they want to go next. And if at the end of that, they still haven't said anything, that's where you can come in and say, hey, you were telling me earlier about whatever, and bring it back to some sort of conversation. The other option is to use 3 minimal encouragers. So someone says something really deep and emotional and they start to cry. You could say, yeah, so earlier you were saying, and kind of every one of those minimal encouragers is an opportunity for them to engage or not engage. And if they take multiple opportunities to not engage, then it might be appropriate to redirect back to some other part of the conversation. But man, silence is one of those ones where people are like, no, I need to know what to say. And I'm like, yeah, but you also need to know when to shut up. And that's like, it's kind of funny because people want to fix and change things, but that silence can absolutely get to the heart of a conversation and or make you that trusted, safe person that they've never had in their life before.
It's and it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're holding time and space for them. So it's almost by saying less is you are making that person feel more sort of centered and valued than if you however much you might be, or let me help you, let me talk. Again, that's on our agenda, isn't it? Whereas you're kind of going to meet them. It feels like you're sitting beside them and trying to help them. I was trying to write that out. I was trying to remember the 6 steps. So just for our audience, let me just check back on our 6 steps of how to sort of really be there for somebody. And yes, it could be you do this in someone in extreme circumstances, but if someone's really upset about something, really for any extreme emotion, these skills would be really useful to, as opposed to trying to problem solve, really useful to help people, wouldn't they? So I've got to say, you sort of said, start off by reflecting back the emotion. So it's when we were right at the start, sort of saying, I'm guessing you're feeling frustrated or really angry or upset about the circumstances. You're just trying to express the emotion that you feel like they're saying. They might not have said they feel angry. You're saying, you sound really cross or frustrated about the situation, or really angry or upset, or whatever it might be, to see if they go yes or no, and correct you, but to almost put words around the emotion and to show that you're not judging, you're just trying to understand. So you're trying to understand it. And then you talk about minimal encouragers, which are I've called it something like non-words. So your and non-verbal communication. So eyes and nodding. So if you're looking at them, so that they go on or something like that to keep them talking.
Yeah.
So show you're doing that. And then you talked about, I think it's the mirroring, which was interesting. You saw someone start getting them to carry on. So you were saying you reflect the last 3 words of the sentence, and that made you really frustrated, really upset because, or that's it's sort of getting them to go on, and then you're just sort of reflecting back a little bit of the statement so that they
and with that one, you're not really pulling at many emotions. This is literally just a few words. So to give another example than the one I gave earlier, someone's coming up and saying, oh my gosh, no, my boss is the worst ever, and they just make my life, a living hell. And you're like, oh, living hell? Well, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And now they're continuing. So it's just that little bit of like, oh, this? Yeah. And then they just keep, going with that.
Yeah, good. Okay. So we've got to mirror, and then I can't read my writing on number 4. Open questions. I can find it. Open questions, which as I say, post questions, but not why. We don't use the word why. And then little summary, which is maybe just in terms. So it's, as I get it, this is the situation in terms of that, and you wouldn't rush to that because that feels like it's less emotive at this point, isn't it? That maybe it's you don't do that at the point when it's the right time to do it. And then 6, the final one. What was number 6 again?
Silence. Just not talking.
I could have done that on purpose, couldn't I? A big space. Silence. The hardest thing, isn't it? They say in sales that the person that starts talking quickest at first is the one that loses. So it's a very powerful skill in many, many places. So that's a great structure, and actually a great human skill that if you wanted to teach communication skills, do a listening skills training course or something in an organization, it would be really valuable for people to understand and learn, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm conscious we've had you here for a while. So I suppose just wrapping this up, any other top tips that you'd like us to take away in terms of this topic?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, this is something that I could ramble on about for a very long time. So last couple kind of quick hit tips for you. As you move into that I, when you're inquiring about suicide, you want to ask very directly. So you don't want to say something like, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Because what does it mean to hurt yourself? I care if you're considering self-harm. I care if you're going to go on a 3-day bender. But right now, I need to assess the safety and the likelihood that you're going to continue living through the next 24 hours. I also don't like things like, well, you're not thinking about suicide, are you? You're using the word, you're saying suicide, that's good. But what you're implying with that question is like, please, please, please say no because I'm really uncomfortable and I can't handle it if you say yes. So very direct, very calm. Hey, are you considering taking your life? Are you thinking about suicide? Are you planning to die today? Something like that, said calm, confidently, not you getting all weird and like uncomfortable with it. That is the best way to ask about suicidal ideation. A lot of people think that if you say the
way, so they actually a matter of fact way rather than a sort of judgy, as the only answer is yes, you're not thinking about it, which kind of means the only answer that's acceptable is to say is no. Right.
100%. Exactly. Yeah. And there was kind of this myth for a while where people thought, oh, if you say the word suicide, you'll put the idea in their head. Not true. It doesn't work that way. It actually works the opposite way, where if you are calm and confident and you say, hey, are you thinking about this? Maybe for the first time in their lives, they will admit that they are. And they feel safe enough to admit that because you are calm and confident about it. You can also kind of couch it in some context. So to use some of the examples we've used in this conversation, if someone is sharing with you divorce, family troubles, whatever, you could follow up with them and say, hey, sometimes when people go through a really hard divorce, they start thinking about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide? And what this does is it lets this person know, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy for feeling this way. Like other people who have gone through similar things feel this way as well. So that's kind of my big tip for inquiring about suicide, asking about suicide. Use the word, be direct, be calm and confident. And then forming a safety plan, that is a much longer conversation, but there are definitely templates online that if you just Google suicide safety plan, there will be some really awesome templates that you can fill out with that person. And then lastly, for lethal means restriction, regardless of what method the person says that they're going to use, and yes, you can and should ask. If the person says, yes, I am considering suicide. Okay, have you thought about how you would try to take your life? Ask that question. Regardless of what they say their preferred method is, you always want to ask about medications and you always want to ask about firearms. In the US, firearms are much more accessible than in the UK and other parts of the world, but regardless of where you are in the world, firearms are the most lethal suicide method. There's no time to change your mind. If you take medications, for example, like if you try to overdose, there is a time period between when you take the meds and when you actually die. And in that time period, you could change your mind and call 999. You could have someone find you and take you to the hospital. There's a time period there. Whereas with a firearm, it's the pull of a trigger. So you always want to ask about firearms. You always also want to ask about medications because medications are so easily accessible. Like you can go to the local grocery store and probably find medications that you could take your life with. So asking about those two, figuring out how to put safety restrictions in place. So can they be stored outside of the house? Can they be stored with a friend or a family member until you get some help? If that's not possible, how can they be stored safely within the home? Lock boxes, someone else having the key, different things like that to again put time and distance between that thought of I'm going to do it, I'm going to take my life right now, and having that actual method in their hands. So that was like a lot of information in about a minute, but those are some other really quick hit tips
that's your
for you.
That was a good recap on your life thing, wasn't it? So the listen, inquire, asking bit specifically without shying away from it, be direct, but without judgment. Then the plan thing is use all those resources and ERP, but that can take time. And then your E is what was it? D stand for? That was avoid the materials.
Lethal means, eliminating lethal means.
Eliminate lethal means. That makes sense. The thing I think that's really is very interesting here is that whole thing about actually just being direct. Are you actually thinking about it? That's if they're depressed. Then loads of people are antidepressant. There's one of the signs that you start to get your brain suicidal thoughts come into people's minds. So it's wildly uncommon. It can be a sign of somebody feeling unwell. So actually putting it into words can almost help them recognize that that's not how their brain should be working and help them want to get help. So that it's actually it's not them, it's that they're just not well at the moment. So it's an interesting way to take the judgment away. I think we could talk about this on and on, but we won't. Jessi, what powerful sort of purpose you've got there going on.
Thank you.
Really good of you to come and join us on the HR Uprising podcast and to continue to spread your word and do great things. Real powerful message. And I love your passion for this, and I'm sure you're going to be spreading this and helping loads of people, hopefully, to do this, to prevent this. It's an important topic to talk about.
Well, I appreciate it. I love the opportunity, and thank you for giving me some space to nerd out about this and hopefully help some people create a community of care and culture within their own organization.
What a meaningful thing to nerd out about. What would if people wanted to reach out to you, they can reach out to you. I'll put your LinkedIn profile up, shall I, and make a link in with you. I know you've got a big social media following as well, haven't you? So we'll put a few your connections in the show notes if people want to follow you.
Absolutely, that would be great.
Super. Thank you so much for joining me.
Take care.
I really hope you found this week's episode useful and enjoyable. If you did, perhaps you could recommend us to a friend or colleague, or give us a review on your platform of choice. It really helps new listeners to find us. Now you can access links to any of the information mentioned in this show via the website www.hruprising.com. Further free resources are also available at www.actus.co.uk. There you can also find out more about our software and training solutions. Finally, why not join our LinkedIn group, the HR Uprising, to share ideas and collaborate with other like-minded people professionals. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast.
This episode was brought to you by Disruptive Media, helping bold entrepreneurs stand out through podcasting, video, and social content. Visit disruptivemedia.co.uk to learn more.